to the south of Medford here in Southern Oregon. And I am a Phoenix City Councilor, and my day job is a fishing guide. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Jacobson.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Katie Jacobson. I'm a county commissioner in Lincoln County, Oregon, which is on the coast, and I live in Newport, Oregon. And my background before being a commissioner was in marine science and coastal policy types of issues.
Thank you. And then finally, Commissioner Lilac.
Good morning. My name is Nick Lilac. I'm the Deschutes County Community Development Director representing Eastern Oregon, and I live in Bend. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we got everybody, and special thanks to the commissioners for taking the time today to have this special meeting. It's a really important topic to hopefully conclude rulemaking on the infrastructure issue. So I think that Esther, you need to call roll at this point. Is that correct?
Yes. Commissioner Halova.
Here.
Commissioner Sandoval.
Here.
Commissioner Warren.
Here.
Commissioner Lilac.
Here.
Commissioner Jacobson.
I'm here.
Vice Chair Pearmine.
Here.
And Chair MacArthur.
Here. Thank you. And I think at this point, your intention was to put the land acknowledgement on the screen. I don't know if yeah, great. And for those of you that aren't, that can't see us, I think what I'll go ahead and read our land acknowledgement. We really want to start these meetings with acknowledging the original settlers of Oregon. And so what we're going to say is I'd like to acknowledge that the many tribes and bands who call Oregon their ancestral territory and honor the ongoing relationship between the land, plants, animals, and people indigenous to this place we now call Oregon. We recognize the continued sovereignty of the 9 federally recognized tribes who have ties to this place and thank them for continuing to teach us how we might all be here together. Thank you. And as a housekeeping matter, I am supposed to remind everyone, including myself, which I failed to do last time, is to respond to the agenda scorecard, evaluating staff and on their presentation and discussion. Staff does use those scorecards to help them improve and also see where they've done an incredible job. So hopefully you can fill those out. We now need to approve the agenda for today, and just our topic today is a singular one, and that is to consider adopting rules that will help communities balance infrastructure and housing needs consistent with the direction the legislature gave us in House Bill 2001. So Esther, if you would call the roll on the agenda.
Commissioner Warren.
Aye.
Commissioner Lilac.
Aye.
Commissioner Halova.
Aye.
Commissioner Sandoval.
Aye.
Commissioner Jacobson.
Hi.
Vice Chair Pearmine.
Aye.
Chair MacArthur.
Aye, thank you. The agenda is approved and we can continue on. I guess before we dive into our topic today, I just wanted to take a few moments and reflect on our July meeting. I just was really impressed with everybody on the commission. You bring such a wealth of experience and perspectives and insights into all of our discussions. And I'm really personally very pleased at the prospect of spending the next couple of years with you tackling some pretty important issues here in Oregon. Excuse me. So thank you for that. And I was particularly impressed with our conversation on the climate-friendly, equitable communities agenda item. I was thinking about it later, thinking that this Zoom technology is sometimes cumbersome and certainly difficult for some folks to participate in the way they want, but it really afforded us the opportunity to have a really robust conversation with staff and commissioners all interacting at one time. I thought it was a really nice dynamic. Generally, the way we work is we have commissioners sitting on a dais, and then we have the testifiers come up and staff. And in this case, because we can all see staff faces and you can see our faces, I thought it was more of a conversation, sort of a work session, rather than just a number of bilateral conversations between staff and commission members. So there are some advantages to this technology. But there were some takeaways. I was reflecting on how rich the conversation was, and there's some takeaways that I had substantively on that that might be worthwhile, given that we have this unique opportunity of this special session in August. We don't normally have this chance, but as staff is evolving the charge and the RAC composition for and positioning us to initiate rulemaking in September, it might be a useful place just to reflect on some of the themes, at least that I heard. I heard enthusiastic support for initiating rulemaking in September on this very important topic. And we also understand as a commission clearly that land use and transportation and housing are really linked. And we have to holistically think of these separate rulemaking efforts in the context of community and these parts that are all really important to community. Process-wise, I heard a lot of conversation about inclusivity and equitable outcomes. And that starts way upstream. As you all know, it starts both with the charge this commission will forge. The staff is evolving for us as we speak, but that we will forge in and adopt in September. But it also needs to be reflected in the composition of the Rules Advisory Committee. And I know that staff is working on that. The committee needs to be diverse. It has to have a number of different perspectives. We have to have really clear outcomes that are inclusive and equitable outcomes as well. The other thing I heard really distinctly is that we want to make sure we include other and become partners and are partners with other agencies, the Oregon Health Authority, ODOT, Housing and Community Services, and others, to bring those into those folks and that expertise into this conversation. And I also heard the need to make sure that this rulemaking effort establishes a way for us to track progress, for individual communities to track progress, but for us to track progress and the state of Oregon to track progress across the board. So really, it's really key to have performance measurements and targets to do that. And I'm sure there were several others, but I kind of wanted to hit some of the big picture items that were in my mind, reflecting on that conversation. And I know that staff is working on that, but wanted to share that with you. Any other quick observations on that? I don't want to take away anything from the infrastructure discussion, but if other folks have other comments that you think might be useful to staff as they're evolving the charge for the committee, please feel free to chime in. Katie Permine, Vice Chair Permine.
I'm so sad to have missed the conversation, and so happy to hear how well this is going with staff and new commissioners and existing commissioners too. And I think I've shared this at other meetings too, but I think calling forward justice and equity as one of the 4 pillars too. I heard transportation, housing, and land use system, but also our, just really grounding in our people as what we're centered. And with that, just thinking about how we really humanize this work. Often a lot of the language historically, the language itself really dehumanizes folks. And so trying to put the people back into the language as much as possible. And that's just a thought I wanted to share.
Thank you. Anyone else want to comment? You can just raise your hand. I think I can see all of you at this point, perhaps. Commissioner Halava.
I like what you referred to with regard to thinking about the links between the various areas of rulemaking, housing, climate change, to be specific. And I just, when you said it, I was like, oh yeah, I have to remind myself. And I'm very much into the climate change, obviously, part and the housing part. And even I see them as 2 different things, and they're not at all. So I think it's just a continual reminder that we have to tell ourselves, like, we have to link these things, we have to link these things. So I think that's super important.
Thank you. Commissioner Sandoval.
Yeah, I really appreciated the way staff broke up the different courses of action and like the kind of benefits and I guess challenges that could come out of each course of action. That really, at least that was a starting point for me to then kind of, delve into it a little bit more fully. But that was excellent. I just found that to be very, very helpful.
Thank you. Commissioner Jacobson.
Yeah, I just want to say, having it had been my first meeting actually participating, I just have to give the staff a big kudos because I thought that was a really well-run meeting, and struggling through our own Board of Commissioners meetings on an online format. I know that when it looks seamless, it means it wasn't easy. So just thank you to all of the staff for putting it together. I thought it was really well run. Minor technical problems, which is kind of par for the course these days, but just nice job. I thought it was really nice. I thought the way we let constituents in, get public comment was pretty seamless. So just a nice job in making this work.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any final comments before we move into IBTA is the way it's been modified? Okay. Great, thank you very much. So we can move right into our main event, and that's the infrastructure-based time extension request rulemaking effort. This is in response to House Bill 2001. And I think with that, I'll just turn it over to Kevin Young.
Thanks, Chair MacArthur. And Vice Chair Pearmine and other commissioners. This is Ethan Stuckmeyer, Senior Housing Planner at DLCD. Just going to thank you for joining us again on such a short turnaround with our meeting taking place just a couple weeks ago to talk about infrastructure-based time extension request rules, which is, of course, the second tranche of rules for House Bill 2001, implementing House Bill 2001. So today is the close of the public hearing for these rules. We've taken the feedback that we heard at the July 23rd meeting and incorporated that into some changes that Kevin will talk about in just a second. And so we've spent all of last week kind of making sure that we dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's to get these rules ready. So appreciate all the feedback that we received from the commission at the last meeting. It was very helpful in getting us ready for today. So much appreciated. And with that, I'll hand it over to Kevin.
Thank you, Ethan.
Yeah, thank you, Ethan. Excuse me. Good morning, Chair MacArthur, commissioners, Director Rue, staff, members of the public. My name is Kevin Young. I'm a senior urban planner with the DLCD. And I want to thank you for joining me this morning to continue our public hearing to consider adoption of rules regarding the infrastructure-based time extension request process, otherwise known as the IBTA. As you recall, and Ethan just went over, we opened that public hearing on July 23rd. We had some dialogue. We also received written testimony. And so in response to those two things, we have amended the rules slightly. And I'm just going to go over those pieces. However, there will be time for question and answer discussion afterwards on any portion of the rules if there are questions remaining. Of course, our desired outcome today is adoption of the IBTA rules, either as presented or as amended. And just to kind of step back and contextualize this, again, the IBTA rules are developed directly based on direction from House Bill 2001. And that bill contemplated a process whereby local governments would be able to request time extensions in order to address significant infrastructure deficiencies before allowing middle housing in those areas that are affected by the infrastructure deficiencies. The qualifying infrastructure systems are limited to water, sewer, storm drainage, and transportation systems. And then also in the bill, the language states that deficiencies must either be current deficiencies or expected to be significantly deficient before December 31 of 2023. As we reviewed on the 23rd, our timeline is pretty limited here. And so we're here on August 5th, hopefully adopting rules today. If we do so, we will have allowed a little less than 5 months for preparation and submittal of IBTA requests by the medium cities. Those are the smaller cities, well, not smaller, but cities between 10 and 25,000 population outside the Portland metro area in Oregon. Per the bill, the deadline for those applications is at the end of December of this year. The larger cities and also the metro cities and portions of metro counties that are urbanized have a little longer. So their deadline for the IBTA application is at the end of June of 2021. And so the rules are needed really to provide clarity for those local governments who are preparing these applications to know kind of what needs to be addressed in those applications. So we've made just 2 revisions to the rules since the July 23rd LCDC hearing. The first was to the equity criterion. And so that was amended to include specific reference to available data regarding race, ethnicity, and income within the local government areas, and kind of requiring local governments to look at areas within the jurisdiction that may have some differences in terms of income. And obviously we talked about access to opportunity as well, but I think the inclusion of race and ethnicity data and income data is also very important here. So we've amended our language slightly to do that. And then the second piece was based in part on testimony we received from Al Johnson, the question of whether an interested third party could present evidence within an appeal process. And so we have clarified that question. Also based on direction from the Department of Justice staff, we are specifying that the process for this hearing is a contested case hearing. And if you have questions about that, Steve is here to answer those questions. That's well above my legal understanding. The changes that we've proposed are shown here. First of all, the change to the equity criterion references any other available data sources regarding income, race, or ethnicity within the jurisdiction. So we have looked at the tool, the Opportunity Area Map, as one point of reference, but we also want to make sure that we include whatever available data there is on income, race, and ethnicity. So that is the one change where I think we're being a little clearer about some of the issues that we'd like the local governments to explore. And then the second change to the appeal hearing process is really just, again, clarifying that the appeal hearing should be a contested case hearing. And then lastly, clarifying that that a interested third party, somebody who's testifying in an appeal hearing context, may present evidence. So those are the changes. I don't have a lot more to say, but I'm happy to answer any questions from the commission.
Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, you did a great job. We spent a lot of time on this in July. And so I think a lot of our questions were answered at that point, but I definitely want to open it up at this point to commissioners. Questions? And as Kevin mentioned, oh, sorry, Commissioner Oliver.
Could you just say the contested hearing part again?
All right, we'll go back to that. So this basically states that the appeal hearing shall be a contested case hearing. And the legal significance of that, I may, if you want more information on that, I'll probably defer to Steve to clarify.
Okay, yeah, just like 3 sentences more.
Yeah, I can name that song in 3 sentences. So every action that the commission takes is either an order that results in an order is either through what we call a contested case proceeding, or it's an order in other than a contested case proceeding. And by declaring that we're going to do it as a contested case proceeding, that accomplishes kind of two things. It sets the parameters of how we would conduct the hearing of an appeal of an IBTA request. And it also makes it clear that if someone were to want to appeal our order on an IBTA request, that appeal would go to the Court of Appeals for review, judicial review, as opposed to if it was an order in other than a contested case, it would go to a circuit court, and then it would be a trial de novo rather than at the Court of Appeals, it will be on the record that was before you as a commission when you decide the appeal.
Perfect.
3 sentences if I use a lot of semicolons.
That was good. Thank you.
Thanks.
And a follow-up question probably for you, Steve. So we had earlier this year, we did deliberate on a couple of contested case hearings, and we talked about it and agreed that it had to go to a hearing, but the hearing wasn't, the commission didn't hold the hearing. We were able to designate a hearings officer to have that. Is that still a possibility with these IBTA items?
I believe it is. We haven't specified that in the rule, but I think we would have the discretion to employ a hearing officer for that if we chose to.
Thank you. Commissioner Lilac.
Thank you, Chair MacArthur. Just since the process is still new to me, the only contested cases hearings that I've watched were those in May. In a contested case hearing before the commission, are those, it's obviously the local government that would participate in that because they're the ones that are proposing the IBTA. And is it also, and or could it be citizens that would bring the contested case as they did in the ones that I observed in May? So either body could, or the citizens or the local government could effectively appeal the department's decision. Is that correct?
That is correct.
This is Gordon. The one thing I would add is that the citizens who brought the appeal would have had to have commented during the earlier period, sort of kind of the equivalent of a raise it or waive it situation at the local government level. So we would have known that there were citizen comments during after the initial local government submittal of the appeal to the department.
Thank you. Vice Chair Pearmine.
This is great. And because I wasn't here this summer for the summer meeting to talk about going back to the equity criterion, I heard race, ethnicity, and income. I'm curious if there was discussion related to public health outcomes too, and if maybe people could just do a real brief summary of how those criterion were defined and what else was considered in that discussion. Missed it. Don't have to do too much work, obviously, but if there's just a real top level you could give me.
I think it's probably accurate to say I don't know that we really looked at health outcomes as part of this criterion. Part of the challenge was we were looking for a tool that could be utilized statewide where we had readily available data. What we settled on is an opportunity area map that's actually maintained by the Oregon Housing Community Services Department. And it looks at things like labor market engagement and poverty rates and those kinds of things by census at the census tract level. So it allows the local government to look at this data and then look at equity outcomes community-wide and how IBTA requests may or may not have an impact on those characteristics. So the data is somewhat limited at the census tract level. However, there are, I believe, available data sources regarding income, race, and ethnicity. They may not be as frequently updated. I think the ACS data that's updated, I think it's on a 3-year cycle, is not as accurate at the census tract level, but the 10-year census data is more accurate as I understand it. On the health outcomes, I guess I'm not aware of a sort of a statewide database that might be referenced. If there is such a tool, I suppose that could be folded in here. But that's the extent of my knowledge.
Chair MacArthur, Vice Chair Permine.
Yes, Deputy Director Green, thank you.
Thank you. I'm really excited by the question, Vice Chair Permine, and hope that the following will be at least interesting. The state of Oregon, you might be aware, Vice Chair Permine, has been updating its 5-year state health improvement program plan, or state health improvement plan, SHIP. We provided information on that in the canceled May meeting packet, and we're going to hear from OHA partners at that meeting. We're looking to basically align our efforts with respect to housing, transportation, and our entire approach for urban planning with these same health outcomes. It's ironic, kind of hindsight being 2020, we don't have a health goal. We also don't have an equity goal or a climate goal. But we know that, walkable mixed use communities, or the kind of converse, inequitably served communities are a significant impairment or impediment to equitable public health outcomes. So as an agency, we're very interested and have forged partnership with OHA on working to implement this SHIP, and been participating with them, really following their work. They're kind of ahead of us on this for sure. They're leading the state on this, and over years' work of defining kind of outcomes and markers for health, and that also goes to the built environment. So if you would like, we could try to provide at least a short update on that in your September packet or prior, about the final SHIP plan. We had just a bit about it in, I think, the director's report in the July packet. But this is quite a fascinating topic to discuss. I think that with respect to this kind of very specific and time-bound IBTA rule, Kevin has kind of nailed it on using best available information for local governments so that they can comply. Kevin, maybe you could remind us of the kind of the sunset timeline on this rule. It's quite short, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't, do the best we can, ask local governments to provide the best information they can find. But I just want to say that even if we don't kind of capture public outcomes within this IBTA extension request, we are very interested in holding that conversation and providing better alignment on health outcomes and programmatic objectives as an agency across health, housing, transportation, climate, from an equity perspective. So there's a lot to say of, it's not in here, but I'm so glad you brought it up.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Deputy Director Green. So anyone else have their hands up, want to comment on Vice Chair Permine? Yeah, just to close the loop on, or just to further the discussion on that piece. Thank you, Deputy Director. So I know many communities have been measuring public health outcomes, so it is already in process in many communities. So I think that as we further this, just if we can flag it as something to track, as you mentioned, there's stellar work going on in counties and cities. And so I think just knowing that it does exist in some places, and suggesting that people integrate the information that they've already been potentially measuring, it's worth considering.
If I may, Chair MacArthur, Vice Chair Permine, there'd be nothing, since this is, I was also worried about data availability within income, race, and ethnicity because of the limitations of sort of income by race crosstabs at the census level right now. And so we have a lot of work to do on that. But Kevin reassured me that it is other available data. So there'd be nothing that would stop the commission from adding public health here to provide that opening, as Vice Chair Permine has suggested. So thanks, Vice Chair Permine. That would be
I think you're right to kind of open, from a staff perspective, you'd be right to open the door and remind folks that that is part of what we're looking at here in urban planning in general.
Thank you. Other commissioners? I don't see, and oh, Commissioner Sandoval, yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So maybe I'm oversimplifying this, but so here we're basically saying that cities are that we're trying to break the barriers of well, we're talking about these opportunity areas, right? So areas that have more assets basically and more resources, that we're trying to help low-income communities and also communities based on race and ethnicity that have been historically segregated have access to those areas, and cities have to demonstrate that they're actually doing that, desegregating these communities. Is that basically the gist of that?
I think what we're in the context of this narrow question, which is really about infrastructure needs for areas and providing additional time for local governments to address those needs. What we're trying to get at here is making sure that those decisions that we make on those infrastructure requests aren't reinforcing or creating inequities within those communities. So that's why we're asking the local governments to look at, okay, let's look at the differences in census tracts within within our area and differences within the city by income, race, and ethnicity. And the point was made on our TAC. One of the members said, it's very possible that in the long run, approval of an IBTA request for an area that is an opportunity area is going to be the best way to provide access to those opportunities in the long term. And so, that conversation was, it's not as simplistic to say that granting an additional time to address infrastructure constraints is going to perpetuate inequality. It's not necessarily a simple question, but we're asking local governments to look at this and also to speak to the question in the context of a larger plan of actions that the local government and community partners are taking to reduce that inequality within the local government's jurisdiction. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does actually. Thank you.
Great. Other commissioners have questions before we open this up to public comment?
Chair, Commissioner Halova has her hand raised.
Thank you, Commissioner Halova.
Yeah, and even for being on the rack, and I'm not on the TAC for this particular issue, it's super confusing. not what you presented. It's just it's a hard thing to wrap your head around, the IBTA. I mean, it's basically, if I'm correct, and this is what I'm asking Kevin Young, it's basically saying a jurisdiction is saying they can't move forward with missing middle housing because there's an infrastructure deficiency and they need a longer amount of time to address that. And this action is trying to make sure that people aren't using this as an excuse, or not using it as an excuse, but like being real about why there isn't this. Why is there an infrastructure deficiency? Is it because in the past it was sort of made to let happen because of issues of income, race, and ethnicity? And if you're going to not institute missing middle housing, you need to at least examine why it is that you have this infrastructure issue, and why do you need more time to institute this missing middle housing? Is that a good assessment?
That is a very good assessment. I think you've captured it, and again, I'll say in our conversations with the TAC, we talked about areas where lack of adequate infrastructure might be in a relatively impoverished part of a city, or it might be in a relatively affluent part of the city. There isn't necessarily a correlation there,
Right.
But we don't want to turn a blind eye to the actual impacts of, the additional time requested
Right.
to address infrastructure. So yeah, I think you've
and it's basically a filter in which all of our jurisdictions should be looking at any decision, right? And infrastructure seems so technical and specific, and you can kind of, like Vice Chair Permine said, you can forget the people part of it, especially when you get into the infrastructure or transportation or any of these more technical areas. And this is saying, don't just look at a map and say like, oh, we don't have infrastructure here, we can't institute missing middle housing, without saying what are the patterns in that city that led to that infrastructure deficiency, either purposeful, potentially in a more affluent neighborhood, or neglectful, potentially in a not as affluent neighborhood. And so this doesn't solve any of these issues that we're talking about at all. It just makes sure that nobody delays putting missing middle housing in because of these issues.
Right. You've said it well.
Lots of meetings to get to that point.
Nice job. Yeah. Commissioner Lilac.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, this is I'm sure a really basic question. Going back to my first question about the citizens' ability to participate in the process, and I appreciate Gordon's comment that citizens must have previously participated. This is just maybe it's the most basic question, but does the local government, when it says the local government submits the application, what is the local government's process? Is it just the Public Works Department, for example, preparing the application and submitting it to the department? Or is there a local elected body? Because obviously these are, given the conversation we've already been having this morning, have really important impacts on whether areas are served or not, or what areas are included or excluded. If that's literally just, and I say this as a staff person in my own county, if this is just a staff level decision, I'm just curious where that public comment or that public participation might occur at the local level prior to the department, or is it just in the department's comment period reviewing the local government's application? Thank you.
That's an excellent question, and it's one that we've thought about a bit. I think part of the problem, part of the concern is that with the timeline, the very limited timeline we have, we've not been specific in rule about what that local government process is. And so it will be up to the local government to determine how and under what circumstances they actually submit an IBTA application. I will say, we are working through scopes of work now for some of that work that will be funded under the monies allocated by House Bill 2001. I'd say in all cases, the local governments are thinking about that. And, typically it's planning commission review, city council concur. Our rules aren't requiring any formal process on the part of the local government, but that's certainly stipulated. But to get to the second part of your question, the opportunity for citizen engagement certainly is included as part of the evaluation process for the IBTRs. So moving backwards, I could show you the section of 0360 whereby an interested third party would achieve standing. So the department will be publishing the IBTA request that we receive. We will allow a certain amount of time for comment. So any interested person may participate, submit testimony and evidence at that time, and that's how they would achieve standing for subsequent, if there were a subsequent appeal or through that initial department determination process.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I appreciate the flexibility for local governments and appreciate that there are multiple opportunities for citizens to participate in this process. Thank you.
And Kevin and Chair MacArthur, if I could, the reference for that is OAR 660-046-0360 sub 2. It's a 21-day public comment period.
Great. Thank you, Ethan. Other comments or questions from commissioners?
Yeah, Chair MacArthur, this is Commissioner Warren. I just had a quick follow-up question for Nick. I'm just wondering if you could give us an example, and I think this would be helpful for me to help kind of wrap my head around kind of the public comment period of what you may expect for just regular citizenry to kind of come up with here. Like, so for example, are they going to be appealing the fact that their local government is applying for an IBTA instead of allowing them to build middle housing, or what are you expecting to see here?
And I wasn't clear. Was that a question for me or Commissioner Lilac?
Sorry, for you, Kevin. My apologies.
Okay. All right. Very good. You know, that's a good question. I could imagine a variety of engagement. You know, certainly there are housing advocates statewide that might wish to be engaged in the decision-making process, and this would allow for that level of engagement. But at the community level, you may have folks who maybe have experienced infrastructure deficiencies, wish to speak to that question, or you may have folks who want to speak about the disparity within the region and how this will or will not reinforce, you know, patterns of inequity. So, you know, it could be pipes in the ground and more technical kind of analysis, or it may be more of a, you know, in line with the considerations in the equity criterion. I could imagine both.
Commissioner Warren, just to follow up, this is Gordon Howard. There is no provision. The one thing that a local citizen or group couldn't do is appeal the fact that a local government didn't apply for an IBTA. It's only, you know, it's the local government starts the process by submitting the IBTA to us, and there's no ability to demand that, you know, appeal to the commission that the local government should have adopted an IBTA but didn't.
So I have a question about what we think might happen with this. If I'm thinking about the way urban planning works, you have pipes in the ground already, transportation, sewer, stormwater, and generally, and in the smaller communities or mid-sized communities between 10,000 and 25,000, those communities the rules we adopted in July would just allow one more unit on those single family zoned areas. So my general sense, in kind of remembering how things at least worked in Portland when I was a planner there, and obviously other communities are different, I guess I don't see how one more unit in most communities in single family areas would exacerbate the water issue or sewer or whatever, that these issues might come to play more distinctly in the larger communities. Is that your assessment of staff?
Yeah, I think that is, excuse me. I think that is generally our expectation. And I'll say broadly, you know, based on some of the stipulations in the bill, the additional impact that we're anticipating from middle housing over that brief time period until 2023 is fairly small. And so how many situations are we expecting where it's that middle housing increment that's really going to, you know, be the last straw that tips an infrastructure system into you know, an inadequate level of service? Probably fairly few, but I will note that the bill also speaks to existing infrastructure constraints or infrastructure deficiencies. And so there may be situations now where there are existing conditions and middle housing would exacerbate those problems. And so this would allow additional time for that issue to be addressed.
Thank you. Other questions from commissioners?
Yeah, this is Commissioner Jacobson, and I guess going back to a comment that Commissioner Lilac made just a couple minutes ago, and sorry for kind of bringing us back and forth. I was trying to jump in, but I just kept getting this. Anyways, kind of back about, you know, not requiring a formal process for local governments to follow. That kind of gives me a little bit of heartburn, and I guess why that is different processes often yield different outcomes simply as a result of the process itself. And process is often to blame for creating disparity. There's a lot of processes in themselves that have disparity that result in further disparity. And so while, requiring a certain process is not going to be required out of this rulemaking, I would say that with that not happening, there needs to be some best practices kind of created that can be shared with communities, so that you have a roadmap, so to speak. And I would look at that also as more of a living document. So you create it now, people start using it, but as different governments go through this process, you might pick up certain things that other ones have done that then can be added to that best practices document. Like I said, it gives governments a tool to use, so they're not just starting from scratch, but also that you can create that roadmap in a way that doesn't have a process that creates more disparity. And then thirdly, as I already said, that's a living document that as different communities take that and build from it, you can go back in and add different things that a certain government has done that then, can become a best practice moving forward.
That's a really good point. I will say the time period is limited, but I think it's an issue that often does get lost, which is the relationship between infrastructure capacity and development of any kind, but in particular housing. There is a very clear link there, and I think to the extent that local governments can make that relationship more overt and engage a broader portion of the public in that conversation, I think that's all to the better.
Good points. Anyone else any other commissioner would like to say something before we go into public comment? I don't know if I can see everyone on the screen, but I don't hear anyone, so I will assume that, Anya, did you have your hand up or not? Okay, great. Well, thank you, staff. We're gonna then open it up to public comment, although quite frankly, I guess I should look to Esther. Is anyone, I know we had the testimony from Al Johnson, both the original letter he submitted in July, which is part of our packet, but then just late last evening, Esther, you sent some email exchange between Al Johnson and staff to say that his issues are resolved relative to the document that Kevin and Ethan prepared. Is there other written or verbal testimony we need to consider today?
Esther, I did not receive any other verbal testimony or request to comment.
Great, thank you. So I will close the public comment period and move into deliberation. So commissioners, what is your sense of where you want to go with this? Not hearing any kind of other things we want to discuss, so perhaps we could entertain a motion.
Chair, Commissioner Warren has his hand raised.
Thank you very much. I couldn't see you, Commissioner Warren. I apologize.
That's fine, Chair MacArthur. I was just going to say, this IBTA rule seems fairly straightforward to me as far as actual usage. I don't expect to see a whole bunch of communities really applying for this thing because it's a fairly short window they have to even apply for the process. So I would just caution that the commission not get too bound up in the weeds on this one.
Excellent point.
Deputy Director Green has her hand raised.
Great. Well, I might call on Commissioner Lilac first.
Please.
Well, thank you. I was just going to say, clearly great work by staff and working with everybody involved in this highly technical issue, and then incorporating the public comments that have been submitted recently into the final proposal. Certainly as a new commissioner, this makes it very easy for me. So thank you very much.
And I guess I'd like to echo that. I just think the staff report is so straightforward and it's so clear what the testimony was in July and how staff has responded that it's really nicely laid out. Thank you. Deputy Director Green.
Great, thank you. And I just, since I have the floor real quick, just might mention that Director Rue has been called off to the governor's office for budget discussion. So I know he sent you a note, Chair MacArthur, but I'm not sure that you've seen that. He'll have to, if he hasn't already, he'll have to peel out and be on a participate on a call at 10. So I'll take over for the director's office if that's okay.
Thank you.
You bet. And then with respect to the motion, I just wanted to be clear if whoever, whichever commissioner is moved to move a motion for adoption, whether or not there was the addition of public health and the data that jurisdictions would be asked to consider and describe those public health outcomes in addition to race, ethnicity, and income. Just wanted to be clear if it was the will of the commission that we include that that addition before we wrap up today. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone like to, well, first of all, is there general agreement? We'll go to a motion in a moment, but I don't want to do a motion if it's not clear that we want to go that direction. So is there general agreement among commission members that you would like to add some language in the process that includes health and the issues that both Vice Chair Permine and others raised? Commissioner Jacobson?
Yeah, I would be in favor of that.
I would like to know, sorry, Chair, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I switched from my headphone. Would it be an optional thing or a required thing? Because I know a lot of our discussion and our RAC and our TAC had to do with trying to make sure all jurisdictions could address or at least try to address a certain issue. And so we tried to create criteria that's like, all jurisdictions can get a data source for this. They should and can address it. And then these are a bunch of things we would love to see, but not all jurisdictions have the same starting point. And to ask somebody to go and find data that doesn't exist for them is kind of hard. And so if that was added, I would like to think about the distinction between those two, because we spent a lot of time thinking about that.
Thank you for bringing that up. That's a really useful perspective from the TAC.
Chair MacArthur?
Yes.
Sorry, I have their hands up in the panelists. If you can see, if you open the panelist button, where hands up there. And then I would just say I would be in favor of adding public health to the top line where it says any other available data sources regarding income, race, ethnicity, public health. And that way we're just saying if there are other available data sources rather than requiring it, if it's available. That's how I would recommend adjusting it, the motion.
So how would this, you see it on the screen, Vice Chair Permine, what can you add the actual words in there that so the commissioners can grab on to what you're referring to?
Well, I can't get in the slide itself, so I don't know if that is actually something functional that people could do.
Esther can do that. Sorry to interrupt Chair MacArthur, Vice Chair Permine, but Esther, if you don't mind putting public health right in between race, comma, and or. I'm sorry, after. So would you like me to try this, Vice Chair Permine?
Yes, please.
Okay, so it's so Esther, if you can edit, I'm not sure if you can. I should ask that first. Esther, can you edit?
Might be Kevin.
Okay, Kevin, can you edit?
That's a good question.
You might have to just sort of exit presentation mode, and it might be a little messy, but I think that we could see. Yeah.
All right, let's see.
If you escape, there you go. There you go. So it'd be and any other available data. So this is where it's be optional regarding income, race. Exactly, or public health, yep. And then you delete the previous or. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. And then we just
thank you for doing that, and thank you Vice Chair Permine. So do other commissioners agree with that change? Or does anyone disagree with that change? Just kind of raise your hand. I don't see any hands raised.
Commissioner Sandoval's hand is raised.
Commissioner Sandoval.
Okay, thank you. So it's not that I disagree with it more than I think we need to think a little bit more about it. So when you're talking about income, it's obviously an important issue, right? Public health. But if you're thinking about income, race, ethnicity, those are populations. And I look at public health as more as an issue. So if we include all these different issues, then why would we, like, why wouldn't we include education? I think education is as important as public health, right? So I just think we have to be very, I guess, very clear about what we want people to measure and the reasons why. And so I see public health as not being necessarily a population, whereas the other things we're talking about, populations. So if we could just talk a little bit about that.
Thank you. So I wonder if staff could respond to this, because I also was confused. Not that I disagree with the idea, but I'm confused about how a practitioner on the ground would use that information, gather that information, and how that might be helpful in an application to delay implementation of House Bill 2001 with regard to infrastructure based on that information. I don't understand that.
Kevin, Chair MacArthur, if I may, and then Kevin should speak to this if he has anything addition, but maybe it would help if we added public health outcomes. And then to Dr. Sandoval's point, if we're going to be really comprehensive, we would say, or access to education. But the point is, what we're saying, I guess, is what I hear Vice Chair Piermine saying, and she can say it better herself, of course, is that we would not want to exacerbate public health disparities by existing public health disparities by not by allowing an inter-request that perpetuates segregation. And so yeah.
I get that, but I don't understand how that works on the ground. If I think about limited dollars that a jurisdiction has for infrastructure improvements, it could very well be, you can't just look at the area in question. You need to look at where the infrastructure dollars would have been spent.
That's right.
Versus where they will be spent. And so I don't quite understand how a practitioner on the ground could make that assessment. And does this rule allow for a big picture of the community and where those dollars, because there's limited dollars, it's an opportunity cost. So if the dollars are taken from industrial development that provides jobs for folks ultimately and goes into housing, that might still be a really good choice, but that is the choice that communities will have to make at some point to be able to honor this legislation. So I'm still struggling with how this works, and perhaps Kevin, you might want to comment on that.
Yeah, it's a good question. I have to say, I think in the context of infrastructure, when public health is introduced, at least in my mind, that tends to send me towards questions of water quality, health hazard from, say, septics that are not functioning properly, and that sort of thing. And I know that I think the intent is much broader than that. How you operationalize it on a broader scale, I'm not really clear, how that might work.
May I make a suggestion, Kevin?
Yeah.
So for me, it goes to sidewalks.
Yeah.
And so that's the kind of the infrastructure that comes to mind for me here, Chair MacArthur. But I think that if Commission moves forward with this amendment, it would be something we would want to explain in some detail in the best practices guide that Commissioner Jacobson has suggested.
So would a community be able to use use the sidewalk excuse for not allowing more housing? I didn't think that was, it's important. I believe it's important. I'm not saying that. I didn't think that we were allowed to make that as a consideration necessarily. So maybe I'm not fully understanding the rule.
No, Chair MacArthur, I think you are correct. In the threshold section of the rule, in terms of transportation improvements, we've been pretty well, I don't know if bare bones is the right term, but we talked about sidewalks in particular as as an issue that, of course, we want pedestrian connectivity. We want enhanced services, we want bike lanes, all of that good stuff. But on the other side of that coin, are we really saying, oh, we shouldn't have any middle housing in any of these areas? And of course, that includes duplexes until that infrastructure is in place. And, part of the problem is I think I spoke about on July 23rd, is it's easy to say, yeah, improve the sidewalk in front of this property where we're building middle housing. That's fine. But if there's not a continuous network in the area, do we forestall middle housing until that's in place? It's a policy question. And I'm not telling you it needs to be one way or the other, but in that discussion with the TAC, I think we settled on, no, we're going to set it fairly minimal standards in terms of transportation system requirements. Emergency vehicle access, we want to make sure we don't have any unsafe intersections or transportation corridors that are, not meeting level of service standards or, mobility standards. That's pretty much what we settled on with transportation system improvements.
Thank you. And then Commissioner Pearmine, you had your hand up earlier. Oh, no.
I mean, both Deputy Director and Kevin have explained sort of some scenarios, so transportation, sewer, and it is a justice question of where proximity to freeways. There are many ways that people are measuring the impacts in community related to public health. And so it's something that is already occurring. In the way this is described, it's an optional thing to consider. So, and it is interrelated between and often combined with the other issues of income, race, and ethnicity. So it's something that's being measured already. I think it makes sense to add it, and I'm also it's also okay if people disagree with me. I'll vote for it either.
And so just I believe in the concept. I just want to make sure I say that, but I'm thinking about, I would, if we place that in there and a community uses the health issue, let's say there is currently single family zoning near a freeway, and certainly those particular folks are getting more pollution than others. So if the community could then choose to say, well, we're using the IBTA not to place more density in that area because there's more pollution from that highway. That probably makes sense for everybody, but then you also lose middle income housing in that particular area. Maybe that's a good thing. Again, I'm trying to figure out how a practitioner on the ground uses this to both for the purpose we're trying to get to, the goal we're trying to get to, which is more middle income housing. So I guess I'm just still a little confused, but it could just be me. So, and I think Commissioner Jacobson had your hand up. Is that right?
Yeah, I did. Thank you. And I guess just to maybe just share insight into my brain and how I think about this. So, with the goal being more middle income housing, I look at using a community using its public health outcomes to help drive sort of maybe where you put that or have mutually beneficial goals. And so, for example, in Lincoln County, where I live, one of our existing public health outcomes that we're trying to get is that low-income individuals and families have better access to healthy foods. That's an existing health goal that we have. Because many of those people are housed in locations where there really isn't any healthy food options that are immediately available. So maybe the only store that's available to get to easily is like a mini mart. And in that mini mart, all you have is prepackaged foods. You can't buy produce. You can just buy hot dogs and that kind of stuff. And so our health outcome is trying to make sure that that population has better access to food. And so I look at using your existing health outcomes within this context to have sort of mutually beneficial goals. So that's how I look at it. So it's not just about getting that middle income housing, but thinking about, are you creating middle income housing in a place where you're also meeting this goal of making sure they have access to those food options and you're getting both. That's the way I sort of think about this.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense. In this case, it's the zoning is already there in the places. And so what we're saying, that communities have to increase density in those existing single family zones, but for some infrastructure considerations, they could delay that zoning upgrade. So it's not planning on a new community, it's looking at the single family zones. But and I think we also have Commissioner Sandoval and Halava wanting to speak as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, okay, so I think if you look at race, ethnicity, and income as populations, and then the public health as outcomes, that makes a lot more sense to me. I think that's so I mean, I would support that. The only thing I would be worried about is how could different communities define public health outcomes to really kind of slow down this process.
Thank you. Commissioner Halava?
Yeah, I think this is a really great discussion, and it's a really important item. I think it's the wrong place to put that. This is all about infrastructure and jurisdictions not saying I can't put missing middle housing here because I have an infrastructure deficiency. And we're trying to say, just make sure that you're not saying that because of some factors that deal with income, race, or ethnicity. I think when you add public health outcomes, and then if I were a jurisdiction looking at this list, I'd be like, yeah, that's way too much analysis and thought just for the idea of should we delay putting missing middle housing. So I think it's the right conversation. It's totally important. It has all the right parts. We should pick that public health outcomes and we should place it into the missing middle housing discussion that we're doing. You know, we did the middle housing for the smaller cities and now we have the large cities. We should take that conversation and put that over there. This is really just a very specific technical thing. And the part about this is just to make sure that when you're delaying housing, don't delay it because of some kind of racial prejudices that have been baked into the code and be able to see that pattern. So you could imagine doing a GIS map of an income overlay and being like, oh, this is the area where we're going to delay missing middle housing. Oh, it just happens to be in a high income area or low income area or a certain race or a certain ethnicity. That's a very understandable analysis that can do. Now, if we layer public health outcomes, I think it can be used both ways, like people were saying, and we don't want somebody to take this idea and use it as a negative way to stop missing middle housing. So I think I'm more convinced it shouldn't be here, but I think we should take this whole conversation and make sure we embed it in the actual policy about providing housing, which is the large city rule that will be coming up.
Thank you, Commissioner. You actually were much more articulate on the why I didn't think it was needed, useful here. It kind of throws a wrench into the kind of the process of the IBTA, but I do really believe in the concept and making sure that it's reflected elsewhere as we deliberate on the larger city rulemaking in September would be a really great place to put that. So Commissioner Warren and then Jacobson and then a couple others. So Commissioner Warren.
Yeah, I completely agree with this discussion, especially from Chair MacArthur and Commissioner Halava. But I also, I think, kind of see where Vice Chair Permine's coming from. And I think one thing that we're missing in this conversation is the fact that public health outcomes could be used by some of the community members to kind of maybe fight where some of this middle income housing is going. For example, I think that Kevin kind of brought this up, is that, maybe like, there's some water issues. Like, for example, in Phoenix, we have a bunch of asbestos piping still here. So, would it make sense for, middle housing to be put into a community where, there might be an overarching, health or outcome because of it? And so this might be a place where community members who are existing or who are experiencing these issues already can say, hey, we have some bigger issues to deal with before we can allow more homes to come in here. So I think that opens up for the community input a little bit more as well. So that's my 2 cents there.
Thank you. Commissioner Jacobson?
Actually, I think my hand was up from before, so I had already commented. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And then we have Ethan. You'd like to talk? You'd like to say a few things?
I would. Yeah. Thank you, Chair MacArthur. I just wanted to jump in here and maybe try to clarify some things. What this section is talking about is not a threshold by which an IBTR could be applied for. What this is a department review criteria to review an IBTA request to ensure that a request is not being made in an area of the city that would further perpetuate inequities that have taken place in the past. And so this is really a stopgap, a safeguard against misuse of an IBTA to ensure that middle housing does not or is delayed in a way that would
I think we just had you freeze, Ethan. Chair MacArthur, my apologies jumping in here, but I think we lost him for a sec.
Yeah, for a minute there, I thought it was me that lost you guys. Past experience.
I think he's talking about perpetuating disparity. And I also wonder, maybe Kevin and Ethan, because you and Commissioner Halava has also spent just hours and hours on these topics and been steeped in it. But I wonder if it would be better to put actually the public health outcomes in the next section. I know Vice Chair Pearman, you suggested it in the opening one, but I wonder if it'd be more clear in that second section where it's about, either help, making sure that it helps overcome patterns of segregation. But it's up to the commission's discussion.
Chair.
Yes.
I mean, I actually want Ethan to finish his sentence because I think he made a really big distinction, which is this is not, it's a criteria in which the department can review an IBTA request, right? And say, like, are we going to approve this request or not? Or are you doing this request because of some kind of patterns of discrimination that are bad? So I'm hoping he comes back so we can finish that sentence, because it's not the issue. None of us don't care. All of us care about the same issue, and we want to see that in there somewhere. And the question is, this is a technical, even I thought of it differently. I thought of it as this is how they build their case for their IBTA, and he's saying this is not how they build their case for their IBTA. This is how the department reviews and makes sure, is this a good one to approve or not a good one to approve? So it's important to have criteria in which the department can actually do that review and actually have a criteria. So I kind of wanted to hear the rest of his.
I think Ethan has joined us.
I am back. Yeah, sorry about that, everybody. I'm not quite sure where I dropped off, but yeah, just echoing that is this section in 0360, the portion on your screen here, is not a criteria by which, or a threshold by which an IBTA can be requested. More so, it is a department review criteria to ensure that there is not a misuse of the IBTA application to further exclude neighborhoods that have already been exclusive, and perpetuating those inequities as a result. So,
so can I ask a question to you, Ethan?
Yeah.
If this is not a requirement, or is it a requirement to provide for the jurisdiction to provide this data? That's one question. Maybe you answer that question. Do they have to do this?
Yes. So one of the application requirements is a narrative which details a narrative that details the response to the infrastructure-based time extension request in relation to the areas of opportunity map for OHCS.
Right.
Which really is kind of the proxy by which that we're asking the city for information so that we can do this review.
So if you were to get this review, how would you measure? How would you judge, based on the map, the opportunity areas map? How would you judge the public health outcomes based on that map?
I think it would be difficult to do that review just because we're using OHCS's areas of opportunity mapping for that.
Right. That's sort of what I was bringing about before. Is you got these data sets, right?
Right.
And are they required to bring a new data set that shows public health outcomes? And if so, what we've been trying to do in this process is actually point them to the actual data set, say like, and use that data set, so that people aren't like, what data set how do I evaluate? And then how is the department going to evaluate it if it's not based on a data set that everyone agrees and a criteria? So that's where this, to me, specifically with this issue, I think it's a great issue, and I feel like we can pick it up. And maybe Ethan, you can tell me your thoughts if you feel like there's another place that this can be placed.
There is a little bit of a caveat there. Yeah. So if we were to make this change, we would have to go back and make a slight tweak to the application requirements to ensure that this carries forward, in the application submittal that a city does, so that we can make this review on the back end, right?
Yeah,
So
I guess my question is there another, in all our TAC RAC efforts that we're doing, do you feel that there's a better place to put public health outcomes to ensure all the conversation that we're having? Because this is a very narrow window. This IBTA is so thin and narrow.
Chair MacArthur and Commissioner Heleva.
Yes.
Ethan, can we think about it with respect to the housing production strategies in particular?
Yeah, that would be, so yeah, in the housing production strategies, we do have a section about fair and equitable housing outcomes. And this would fit nicely within there, I think. And then there's also, of course, because we're talking about this in the context of House Bill 2001, I think there potentially is an opportunity in the medium cities rules, the other portion of Division 6, that could potentially fit this when we're talking about, in areas. That's a whole other can of worms. But
so I wonder if we could ask, in addition, I wonder if we could ask staff to go back. We'll continue to deliberate today, and we may or may not want to keep this language in here, but sort of if to kind of make sure we capture this really important concept that we've discussed today and Vice Chair Permine raised. Could we ask staff to go back and look at the other parts of the rulemaking effort that we have not yet adopted? So we've only adopted one piece of that, and figure out the best ways to place the health outcomes concept in there that can actually result in something on the ground that's different than non-health issues, that has it as a consideration. So we did that, the question then comes to the commission here with what we have in front of us. Do we still want or need to have this health outcomes piece in the IBTA? Commissioner Permine, Vice Chair Permine.
Well, I just really appreciate everybody's discussion on this. So first, just thank you, and would say I'm fine removing it here, given the discussion, and including it elsewhere, and picking up the discussion at another time. So I hear the concerns, and I hear the intent of this, and I think that you're hearing that you're hearing me say related to these issues, there's also very, very important justice issues related to public health that have legacy effects in people's bodies that we need to make sure get in this decision making. But if this isn't the place, I totally understand that. And it sounds like we can just move forward with this technical piece today and pick this up elsewhere, unless others feel differently.
Thank you, Vice Chair Permine. Others feel similarly different? I don't see anyone else's hand up, so I will assume that you are in agreement with Vice Chair Permine's recommendation. So let's remove that. At least we don't need to remove it from the screen, I don't think, because that isn't necessarily part of the motion. But thank you, Vice Chair Permine, for bringing this up. It's really important, as you pointed out, and we all feel we need to include this in the right places so that can actually make things happen differently on the ground. So thank you.
Chair MacArthur?
Yes.
This is Ethan. So in response to Kirsten's question about other places, I think I've just kind of done some searching in our rules for the housing production strategy, and not to get too far off course, but we talk about access to opportunity within that portion of the rules. And the question that we pose to cities is, how is the city facilitating equal access to opportunity? And then we define access to opportunity to say high quality employment, business opportunities, schooling, community amenities and services. And then the final one, a healthy and safe environment. So I know that's very broad, and so we could kind of narrow that a little bit further to include those public health outcomes. I think that fits nicely.
I think that's a really quick search you did, and I think that's probably one really good place to do it. And in your spare time, if you could look for some other areas that you might want to include this very important topic in the other parts of the rulemaking effort, that would be great too. So thanks, Ethan. Okay, so I think we are ready for a motion. If someone would be willing to offer one up.
I'm happy to make the motion, a motion. How does that sound, Chair MacArthur?
Yes, please do.
Okay, so I move that the Land Conservation and Development Commission adopt Oregon Administrative Rule Chapter 660, Division 46, including the IBTA rules in Section 0300 through 0370, and as drafted in Attachment B of the agenda item number 2.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
This is Nick. I'll second.
Thank you. Commissioner Lilac seconds the motion. So I don't think we probably need more discussion, so I will just call for the vote. Esther.
Hi, Commissioner Haloba.
Aye.
Commissioner Sandoval.
Aye.
Commissioner Warren.
You're muted, Commissioner Warren.
Actually, I don't see Commissioner Warren on the screen.
Well, why don't you go the rest of the folks, and we'll see if he can make it back on the screen. He was unfortunately muted at the time that he was called on, but we might have lost him as well.
Okay. Commissioner Lilac.
Aye.
Commissioner Pearmine.
Aye.
Commissioner Jacobson.
Aye.
Chair MacArthur.
Aye. And we'll wait a moment to see if Commissioner Warren can re-engage. I really feel for you. And if Commissioner Warren is re-engaging, I see a little box for you, but you're muted. So perhaps if you unmuted, I don't even know if that's.
Apologize, everyone. My internet dropped me.
Thank you. And so you were told to vote on the motion.
I vote aye. That's where we are. Sorry, I'm lost.
I'm sorry about that. I will orient you. So we were in the middle of the roll call with the motion, and there was the motion was made by Vice Chair Pearmine. It was seconded by Commissioner Lilac, and Esther was in the process of going through the roll call, the vote, and we got to your name. And at that particular time, we lost you, and I apologize for that. But do you have a vote on this motion?
I vote aye. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Again, I feel for you. That happened to me about 15 times in the last meeting. So you did a beautiful job of returning. Okay, so the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Thanks to staff for this great staff report and presentation and all your work. And thank you to commissioners. We will end that agenda item, but with all public meetings, we need to have a space on our agenda for folks to comment on non-agenda items. Esther, do we have anyone signed up for public comment? We may have lost Esther.
She is on screen but muted, if I may, Chair MacArthur. Esther, there we are.
Sorry, I'm sorry about that. I do not have anyone for public comment that has signed up.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. So we can end the public comment period, item number 3. And any other comments or things that commissioners want to bring up before we adjourn for today? We made good time and brought up some really good issues. So thank you to everybody sincerely. And we'll see you in a little bit, a week or so, for our retreat. So take care. Have a great week.